Урок номер 5. Lesson number 5. Привет. Меня зовут Костя. My name is Kostya. In the last episode, you learned how to say I want in Russian. It's very simple. Just say Я хочу and then say what you want to do. Я хочу говорить. I want to speak. Я хочу говорить. Я хочу понимать. I want to understand. Я хочу понимать. Я хочу говорить и понимать по-русски. I want to speak and understand Russian. Not only did you learn how to say I want, but you've also learned the following letters. Я, Х, О, Ч, У. Now, when you put these letters together, you get your first phrase in Russian. Я хочу. Obviously, русский алфавит, the Russian alphabet, is very different from the alphabets used in Франция, France, Испания, Spain, Italia, Italy, Германия, Germany, and many other European countries. Why? Почему? 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 Well, here's a brief explanation. The alphabet used in Russia is called Cyrillic. It is called Cyrillic because it's attributed to Saint Cyril, or in Russian, Kirill, a Greek Christian missionary to the Slavic people who lived in what is today Czechia, Czech Republic, and Bulgaria. Saint Cyril and his brother Methodius invented a different alphabet called Glagolitic, but I don't want to complicate my story too much, and we'll just make it very short. What is important to take away from this story is that by the 10th century, this Cyrillic alphabet became the standard alphabet for many Slavic people. Today, the Cyrillic alphabet, with some variations, is used not only in Russia, but also in other Slavic countries like Ukraine, Ukraine, Белоруссия, Belarus, Serbia, Serbia, and Bulgaria. If you want to learn more about the origin of the Russian language, I will include the list of books that you can find in your library, or maybe in the academic library near you, or maybe buy it online. But you can certainly find this list on my website, www.parlibus.com. Just like the other alphabets, русский алфавит, Russian alphabet, changed quite a lot since those bygone years of Византийская империя, the Byzantine Empire. If you travel to Sankt Petersburg, St. Petersburg, then you probably had a tour guide who told you about Tsar Peter I, Pyotr I, who built this beautiful город, city, and initiated great reforms in 1700s that brought Russia in close contact with the European culture. Pyotr I also pushed for reform of the Russian alphabet based on the Latin alphabet. As a result, many Greek letters disappeared completely from the Russian alphabet, but many of them you will still recognize. So if you look at the Russian letter P, like in the name Pyotr, then you'll recognize a Greek letter. And in your math class, in English at least, it represented as a pi. if you're good at recognizing Greek letters on the college or university campus, then you'll find a lot of fraternities with Greek letters, and if you look at those Greek letters, you'll certainly find some resemblance with the Russian alphabet as well. Anyways, the next major orthographic reform that took place in Russia happened after the Коммунистическая революция, the Communist Revolution of 1917. The Soviet government reformed the alphabet, simplified the Russian spelling system, and started a literacy campaign to educate illiterate peasants how to write and read in their native tongue. Fortunately for the learners of Russian as a second language today, this bloodless Soviet reform, unlike their other political reforms, simplified the grammar, грамматика, and spelling rules, правила. Грамматика и правила. Grammar and spelling rules. Anyways, let's get back to learning the Russian alphabet. But I hope you find the history of the Russian writing system interesting, and you can certainly look it up on your own online, or feel free to send me an email, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. So during our last lesson, you learned how to say говорить, to speak. But you don't know how to write it in Cyrillic. So now is a good time to do that, and you'll learn the following letters as a result of it. G, O, V, O, R, I, T, and the last letter is not pronounced, but it has this funny name. In English it's called soft sign, but in Russian it's called мягкий знак. Now, don't worry about saying мягкий знак because it's not easy. For now, we'll just refer it as a soft sign, but you should be able to recognize it now. And this word, which is in front of you, is the word говорить. But now, even though we write with the letter O after G, G, O, V, O, R, I, T. Now, notice that the first time I pronounced the letters correctly, using their official names when you learn the Russian alphabet, but just now I simply used their sounds. So the sounds in this word, говорить, are G, O, V, O, R, I, T. So even though the letters represents these sounds that I just mentioned, the pronunciation of this word is говорить. Говорить. So you write it говорить, but you pronounce it as говорить. Alright, so the first letter is the letter G, and it represents the G sound. G. So let's write this Cyrillic letter G above the letter G, like this. So make sure that you write the Russian letter G, which represents the G sound, right above the letter G in the word голова, which means head in Russian. So we pronounce it as голова, but we write голова. Excellent. So you already recognize the letter O, so that's good. And the next letter that I want you to focus on is letter which looks like a Latin letter B. But it's not. It's a Russian letter V. So right above the Latin letter V in the word голова, write the following letter that looks like a Latin letter B, but in Russian, from now on, you just have to get over this hurdle and remember that this letter that looks like something else to you is actually the sound V. V. And the correct way to represent this letter in the Russian alphabet is V. Now you should have two Russian letters above the word голова, which is spelled using Latin letters, and G and V. So far, these are the two letters that magically show up in that word голова. Now, the next letter that we want to learn is the letter that represents the L sound. L. And this letter is L. L. So this Cyrillic letter L, which represents the L sound, looks kind of like a little house. And it has a little funny crooked left column on the left side. So it's like a little house that looks like it's a little bit tipping off just because there's this funny dot or column that is kind of making this little house not quite straight. So L. So now you should have three letters above your word голова. And since you can easily write O above the Latin letter O and write the Russian letter A above the Latin letter A, then you end up with the Russian word голова. And again, you spell it with G. These are the sounds G, O, L, O, V, A. And you pronounce it like this. голова. голова. Now repeat after me. голова. Very good. Now these Russian letters are absolutely foreign to you and you must simply memorize. And unfortunately, as I said, some letters will just confuse you, like the letter V that looks like the Latin letter B. But don't worry, don't panic. After just a few weeks, maybe even less, you'll have no problem remembering what these letters are, and you'll just look at them and recognize them as Russian letters. Okay, let's move on. Писать. Писать. Do you remember what писать means? Писать means to write in Russian. The word писать is written like this. P, I, S, A, T, and then the soft sign, мягкий знак. The letter P, as you already seen, represents the P sound. Remember that Greek letter from your math class pi that I was talking about? That's exactly the same letter. And the Russian letter P looks exactly the same. Now the problem is that the letter P, P, looks very similar to the letter L, or the sound L. But don't get them confused. Pay attention to that little difference that I was talking about. So in the letter L, remember we were talking about that it looks like a house, but the left column, the left side of the house is kind of a little bit crooked. It's curving and it's not straight. Now the letter P looks like a perfectly built house. All the sides are perfectly straight. So again, just make sure that when you look at the Russian word, you don't get these two letters confused. The sound R is represented by the letter R. At some point, you will have a slip of a tongue and you will refer to it as a Russian P. And the reason for that is because it looks like a friendly Old English letter P, but it's not. It's easy to remember that because when you speak по-русски, that very first letter is the R sound. So that is letter R. And the word Russia, in Russian, Россия, also begins with the letter R, or the letter R, but the sound R. So Россия по-русски, and the letter R, or the sound R, looks to you, at least for now, as a Latin letter P, but it's not. So from now on, just when you see that letter in the Cyrillic alphabet, just think по-русски or Россия. Alright, so take a moment to review these letters. L, P, R. Got it? Very good. Now, if you think that it's not confusing enough, let's add another Russian letter that looks like this. This letter represents the sound S or S. S. Now, to you, it looks like a Latin letter C, but never, never, never is this letter pronounced like in the word cat or to carry something. In Russian, it's always the sound S. S. Remember the word писать, to write? The second syllable, писать, is pronounced as сать, писать, to write. Okay, so that letter is always represents the S sound. Do you remember how to say to speak? Good. Говорить. Do you remember how to say to write? Excellent. Писать. Now, let's go back to the word говорить. We actually missed one letter. So говорить has the E sound in there. Говорить. Рить. Говорить. E. And this letter, which we forgot to mention on purpose, is the letter E, and luckily it also represents the E sound. So both the letter and the sound is E. It's very similar to the sound you produce in English when you say words like meet or like to meet. My pronunciation is probably not very good in English, but to meet or I need something. So again, it's not quite the same, but it's very close. That E sound, E. So for example, if you want to say I want to speak, я хочу говорить, я хочу говорить. Okay, do you hear that E? Говорить. Я хочу говорить. Do you remember how to say to study in Russian? Excellent. Изучать. Изучать. So it's the same sound. Изучать. Изучать. Говорить. Изучать. Therefore, the first letter in the изучать is the very same letter you just learned. E. E. So what is the first syllable in the word to write in Russian? Писать. What's the first syllable? P. And that syllable is written like this. So you have the letter P and the letter E, and when you put it together, you just say P. And the second syllable in the word pisать is sat. Sat. So how do you represent the Russian word to write using Latin letters? Like this, right? It's very simple. But if you want to write that word in Cyrillic, all you have to do is just simply substitute Latin letters with Russian letters, and now it should be very simple. So, for example, the first letter in the Latin word pisать is substituted with the Russian P letter, and so on. So pisать becomes a Cyrillic representation, and it's very simple. But at first, of course, it's not, but it becomes very simple because you simply substitute those Latin letters with Russian letters. And what is a little bit challenging when you take the Latin representation of the Russian word and you change its visualization, its visual representation on a piece of paper or the computer screen using Cyrillic, is that now you have to make sure that you also represent those soft sounds. So last time we talked about using the apostrophe to represent that soft sound t, and remember that that's where that soft sign, that мягкий знак, comes in to help us out. Писать. Now the reason why we have that мягкий знак is because it's not писать, but писать. And this is why that soft sign is very important. All right. So do you have any questions? If you do, don't hesitate to email me. But if you feel like it all makes sense, then try figuring out how to write изучать in Cyrillic. Изучать. Now, it should be pretty easy for you to substitute those Latin representations of Russian sounds. So E, again, remember that we represent that sound in using Latin letters, using a double E, E. You already know how to represent the U sound in Russian. So that's the letter U. You already know the letter Ch, or that represents the Ch sound, and in Russian Cyrillic representation it looks like this. A, of course, that's very simple, and then T and soft signs, so T, изучать. Now the only letter which is missing is this letter, which looks like a number, but it's not. So this letter is called Z, but the sound it represents is Z. So just accept it. It looks like a letter which is a number, but it's not. It is Z. Z. So how do you write изучать? Like this. Изучать. Изучать. All right. I know this is not easy, but again, it's just a matter of practice. So once you practice for a few days, again, after a few weeks, it's going to be so easy that you'll look back and say, what's a big deal about it? But for now, it's very important that you focus and try to memorize these letters, and I'll help you to do that. So the letters are, let's review them. In the phrase «я хочу», we have letters «я», «х», O, Ч, У. In the word говорить, you have letters G, O, V, O, R, E, and then you have the letter T, and followed by the soft sign, so you pronounce it as T. So говорить. The next word is изучать, and the letters are I, Z, U, Ч, A, again by the combination of T and soft sign, мягкий знак, T. So изучать. Писать. П, И, С, А, Т. Писать. And голова. So do you remember what it means? Голова? Yes, it means head. So голова. G, O, L, O, V, A. So we are practicing here how to pronounce correctly Russian letters using their names. When you learn the alphabet, that's what you usually see in any alphabet table. So the letter T is not T, but T. But it's important, as I said in the previous lesson, that you focus on the sound. So even though it is useful to know that the Cyrillic letter T is letter T, but it's more important to remember that it's the sound that matters. So it's T. So when you see the letter Ch, just remember that the sound is Ch. When you see the letter Z, it's not Z, but the sound is Z. So when you put these letters together, when you pronounce Russian words, then just make sure that you are very good at remembering what the sound of that Russian letter is. Now, of course, what you learned as you go along is that when you speak in Russian, the sound of these letters changes a little bit. So, for example, just like we learned that the sound of the letter O becomes a little bit like a sound A, so it is also true of other letters. They kind of start changing their sounds just slightly, and you'll see that there's certain patterns, there are certain rules, правила, rules, that you will learn as you go along. But for now, it's just very important to focus just on the sounds, the way the sound and the letter match. And then from there on, you'll pick up those variations. So I hope it all helps and makes sense. And in our next lesson, you will learn how to say, I don't want to do something. So again, I hope you do want to listen to my next lesson, but in that lesson, you will learn how to say, I don't want to do something. Don't forget to subscribe to Parlibus Russian YouTube channel, and thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.